There are a lot of elements that look like big, hard cocks. It is one of the scariest movies I've seen. I cry because I want to be home as soon as possible. I don't like to be on set. I didn't want it to finish. I want it to last forever. You have to see this movie, which has inspired generations of filmmakers. This is one of the great work of art ever for me. I think every great movie is gay. I just came here. This is a very legendary place for me. I see all the video with all the great directors you invite here, so I'm very proud to be here. Thank you for inviting me here. And I see this book, which I have not read, but I think that I agree with the title, Le cinéma art subversif. I think the problem that I see in many of the movies that I got to see at the theater right now, it's that this is lost a little at the beginning.
Do you always try to be subversive?
I think you must really consider the idea of a cinematic experience as subversive, because the language of cinema is about the dark and the light and the space in between, and how you are brought in front of something that deals with the dreams, and dreams are always about the unconscious, and the unconscious is always a revolutionary force. So if cinema is in a way devoid of this power, it's not cinema. And
this is the best place to talk about cinema.
Yeah.
This one is one of the two last ones in Paris. Do you have a special relationship with video clubs?
I have my own video club because I collect a lot. Okay. I don't think I have as many as you do, but I have many.
We have 50,000.
I might have a little bit less, but I have a lot. I buy constantly. Well, this movie from the great master Apichatpong Weerasethakul, Oncle Boonmee Recalls His Past Lives, which won the Golden Palm. And this was a great jury with the great Tim Burton was the president, and I had the privilege of talking with Tim recently, and he told me that he always fears giving a judgment on something because he might change his mind, and when you do preside a jury and you give a Palme d'Or, what if you have made a big mistake, right? And he told me that he watched again Boonmee and he thinks he made a good choice. It's a great movie. It's one of the great masterpieces of modern cinema. I mean, you selected this because you know that in this movie, the cinematography is by the masterful Sayumbu Muktiprom. With Sayumbu, I did, I don't know, probably 6 movies. 2 I produced, Antonia and Beckett by Ferdinando Cito Filomarino, and 4 or 5 I did, because I did Call Me By Your Name, Suspiria, Queer, Challengers, and the next one I'm going to do is going to be with him.
It's a love story.
Between it's family. We're family. It's really like a very strong personal connection together with an idea of cinema that Sayumbu and I share, which is both humanistic on one hand and very experimental on the other hand. And Sayumbu's formative years were in the Soviet Union, at the great school of cinematography there. And his idea of cinematography is definitely through the lens of cinema, through the lens of film meaning the mean, 35 millimeter, through the lens of painting with this movie Queer, the last movie that I did with him.
The difficulty is to convince someone else he is really part of you. You think he's queer?
We really thought in terms of painting and not in terms of reference of other movies. So the meeting with Sayumbu was very strange because I remember I was producing this movie, Antonia, and I asked the director who he wanted to do the cinematography, and he mentioned Sayumbu. So I found the email address and I sent the email to him as a producer. I said, we have this project if we want to talk about it. He didn't have an agent then. He never replied. And 6 months later, we got an email back from Sayumbu saying, oh, it's my birthday. I've checked my email finally after 6 months. I saw this email and I want to do the movie. And we say, well, we have to meet the director first. So the director went to Thailand, spent time with him. They went into the jungle, he was scouting, and then he did Antonia, and we became friends. Great guy. I have a second story. We were shooting Call Me By Your Name, the scene after Elio masturbates with the pitch,
yes,
when Oliver shows up, and they discuss about it, and then basically they both realize that the summer is over. They're going to be separated soon. And we were shooting very small crew in an attic, real place. The location was as it was. We didn't do any production design. It was simple. And it was just this very young actor for the first time in his life leading a movie, and the other actor was more experienced, Timothée Chalamet and Armie Hammer, and there were like 5 of us with the camera. And when the two realize that they're not going to be able to be longer together, and they cry, we finish the shot. I say cut, and I turn, and there on the corner of the room, on his camera, Sayonbu was crying.
He was crying?
He was crying.
Wow. I was crying watching the movie too, but he was crying like filming it.
He was crying filming, because it was an epiphany. He felt that there was something happening there that was beyond acting. Acting is always a problem.
Do you cry sometimes on set?
No. I cry because I want to be home as soon as possible. I hate to be on set. I don't like to be on set.
Really?
It's difficult to be on set because you have so many people around, never possibility to relax and concentrate, but yet you have to be very concentrated to grab the truth you can grab. And
what's your favorite part of doing a movie then?
I think editing.
Okay.
Editing is a great moment.
Wow.
Because you have the power on everything, basically. Okay.
Interesting. Sometimes it's really painful for some people doing the editing.
No, I love to cut and remove things. It's all about making the perfect. We try.
We always try. There's a movie about that. Songe de la lumière.
Yes, this is an incredible movie, one of the great movies by the great Victor Erice, El Sol nel Membrillo. And this is one of the great movies of transcendence, where you experience in the movie the act of seeing and the act of living. It's very difficult because, of course, sounds very pretentious as an approach, but the director, Victor Erice, is one of the great directors of time and space and light. This is one of the great classics. I discovered this when I was quite young. I go back to this movie constantly. I watch this movie a lot. I remember I was friends with the amazing Bernardo Bertolucci, and we have few movies of Bernardo there. And Bernardo used to say that both he and I were like living life through cinema constantly. So when I pick these membrillos in my garden, I go back to Erice all the time. And it's important to remind people that this is the last movie by Victor Erice. It was in Cannes. Certainly deserved the Palme d'Or, one of the great movies of contemporaneity, which still is a subversive movie. And we were talking about Bernardo, and we have 2 movies of Bertolucci. I picked these 2, Conformiste, one of the great classics of the history of cinema.
Jesus, France!
And La Luna, one of the movies that everybody hates from Bernardo Bertolucci.
Have to go.
Why do they hate him?
I read an incredible piece of writing by Angela Carter, the British writer who wrote The Chamber of Blood, from which Neil Jordan made eventually In the Company of Wolves. The great feminist writer, and very, very deeply intertwined with the visceral stories and atmosphere about femininity. And she wrote a very beautiful, long review of this movie La Luna I think it was the London Review of Books. You can find it online. The assumption she makes of this movie is that this movie, which was considered very scandalous because it's the story of a young child, 16 years old, who descends into the hell of heroin addiction, and the mother, who is a very important opera singer, who tries to save his life, and psychoanalytically, she thinks that the way she can save his life is by having sex with him. And Angela Carter questioned the fact that this movie is absolutely not scandalous and actually is very patriarchal. And the restoration of order in the movie, in fact, in her reading of the movie, goes through the finding of the missing father from the boy. I found that Bertolucci was less ideological than Angela Carter, and there is a sensuality always in Bernardo and a sense of pleasure of things, and a mystery in the pleasure of the way cinema can put together a movement, in the subversion as well. That as much as I admire Carter and I admire the way she writes about this movie, I disagree. It's a great movie about not incest, but it's more about, in my opinion, roots, Bertolucci makes this singer, who's an opera singer, singing Giuseppe Verdi. And as we know, Giuseppe Verdi was from Parma, and Bernardo Bertolucci was from Parma. And melodrama and Verdi are very much intertwined in the work of Bernardo Bertolucci. So it's almost like he himself is going to find a way to cure the addicted self. It's one of the great finale for me in history of cinema, when these three elements, father, mother, and son, are together. There is one great ambiguous scene of eroticism, not with the mother and the son, but with the son and a false father. And it's incredibly beautiful visually. Jill Clayburgh is an incredible actress, and this is one of the greatest performances. Conformiste, I don't know what I can add to one of the most famous movies of the 70s, a great masterpiece. Only to say that the movie goes in different direction from the novel, but Bertolucci has always investigated the kind of power or the destructive power of repression. And certainly if you want to understand what is fascism historically and not historically, particularly in Italy, and how it's dealt, fascism it deals a lot with repression, male repression, sexual repression, you have to see this movie, which has inspired generations of filmmakers forever. This is a very rare movie, and I'm very surprised to find it. How could you find this? This is incredible. La Pivellina by Tizza and Werner Frimmel. This is their first movie. For me, the most important and most surprising directors that I can think of in Italian cinema are Tizza and Werner. They did 5 or 6 movies, and they have this beautiful capacity of looking at people and at the communities they look into. There is a sense of whimsicalness in their work, I think, in the way they shape their movies. It's all about the margin and never about the center. It's very, very profoundly, deeply connected with what they tell us the story of. There is never an exploitative point of view. And in this movie, there is this beautiful relationship with this girl, this little girl, this child, who is met by these people that almost look like people from the circus. It's really one of the great, great movies. Beautiful movie.
I didn't know about it, and then I discovered it. And I was like, is it a documentary or is it a fiction? There's a fine line.
Stanley Kubrick used to say that the greatest cinema is always documentary. And I agree, the capacity of looking at reality and at the same time to practice the mise en scène of reality as a filmmaker is the most difficult thing and the most ethically challenging thing that you can do. And of course, cinema is always and will always be about ethics at work. Cocteau, we will talk about him later, is about the death at work because it's 24 frames older, the person in front, every second. But I think it's more important to say that cinema is about the hygiene of the point of view and the capacity of having a point of view that is not making you jump into your worst impulses, but actually to change your worst impulses. And so for me, the capacity of twisting these point of views of the worst instinct of people, and at the same time to show things that you have not been able to see, it's what a great filmmaker do. And if they work through the principle of reality, even better. I wish I could do a movie like this. It's very difficult, beautiful movie. Samba Traoré, another one of the great classics of my life.
Vamos a Tarami.
Ano ko dara?
Ngayon ang kata.
Idrissa Ouadraogo, I remember, I will never forget when I saw this movie, and it's from one of the great directors of all time, Idrissa Ouadraogo. I miss him so much. It's a movie about a man coming back to the village and the village meeting this man again. And it tells you a lot about the idea of cinema that was coming off of Africa and the power of that cinema. I remember many years ago I did a documentary called Algérie, and it was about the civil war in Algiers at the time in the 90s, and that is when I've been invited to the African the Festival of African Cinema in Milano almost 30 years ago, and I discovered all the great jewels of that canon. I wish there was more empowerment to the cineasts from that part of the world. I remember the great Suleiman Cissé, Osman Sembene, of course Haile Gerima, the great Ethiopian director. I live in Ethiopia. I spent the first 6 years of my life in Ethiopia. And my mother is Algerian, so I am very African in a way.
Yeah, do you think it's why you want this specific cinema to be showcased more?
No, I think it's great cinema. I only want great cinema to be showcased more and bad cinema to showcase less. and less. I think you have two movies that somehow were the text that I used to discuss with my production designer how to make queer. One was Querelle de Brest and the other one was Red Shoes. Both movies take two very important kind of narrative. One is the Jean Genet novel, the other one is a great fairy tale, and they turn into a phantasmagoric other world. Both work with the concept of the mise-en-scène happening on stage and the reality being super heightened, almost in a symbolic way. In Querelle de Brest, which is a movie about homosexual desire, even the architecture of the place is being designed to remind constantly the obscenity or the pornography of gay sex and gay culture that was seen from the perspective of like Tom of Finland. So there are a lot of elements that look like big hard cocks. And in the Red Shoes, the fable of this dancer who will be dying in dance. It's told through the lens of this beautiful, typical of Powell and Pressburger backdrops drawn. The skies are all fake. And so we try to do that with Stefano Baisi, the production designer of Queer, because The Queer is a movie that it's from the book by William Burroughs. We will talk more later. I want to show you a movie. And we thought that there wasn't a Mexico City in the past of William Burroughs. In Burroughs, there has always been Burroughs. So we had to recreate the idea of these places from the lens of Burroughs, not going there and shoot. So it's about William Burroughs, what the world that we are describing. It's not about the reality of the world. And these were very good guides for us, the work of this director of photography, production designer, and of course, metteur en scène, like Fassbinder and Powell and Pressburger. Speaking more about the phantasm in Queer, you brought up Jean Cocteau Orphée, which features in the novel by William Burroughs and in the movie.
Vous êtes gay.
They go and see that movie, and the scene that we show in the movie is a scene where one character enters the other side to find the lover through a mirror. And in that moment, the ghost of William Lee reaches toward Allerton. We shot the scene by creating a movie theater on stage, and the movie theater was made starting from a real size all the way down to a miniature. So when you get to the screen at the end, the screen was like this in reality. And the people you see watching the screen are all puppets that move, so that you can have the one puppet smoke, one puppet move the head. We use some puppetry and some digital enhancement. So the camera goes from Daniel Craig and Drew Starkey all the way to the screen, but it's a set that goes from this to this.
I didn't know.
It's one of the great magics that honestly is the work of our production designer and our director of photography. And the actual screening was real. We didn't add it afterwards. We didn't put Cocteau at the end. Cocteau was on the day in which we shot it.
You said that you hated the stage, being on stage, but when something like that happens...
I remember that day in which we shot this scene, I was so nervous and so upset that I didn't enjoy it. Now that I see the movie, I think, oh, we did a good job there. But I didn't like doing that. But we have two of my favorite French movies. One is one of the great masterpieces of all time, La Grande Illusion.
Nous devrions peut-être les prévenir. De quoi?
Le trou. Oui, le trou.
This movie is incredible. The way in which Renoir shows his profound understanding of every alleys of life is insane. Because, you have these prisoners of war in a war that was all about chivalry that come from everywhere, and he knows every behavior of every character. He knows everything, and he knows how to portray them, and he gets performances that are incredible for the rest of our time in this place.
Si tu savais comme je te déteste.
Je te jure que je te le rends bien, va. Veux-tu que je te dise, est-ce que t'es pour moi un colis, t'entends? Un véritable colis, un boulet que je traîne aux pieds.
He knows, in a beautiful way, the lack of femininity in a very masculine movie. In two great moments. One is when they decide to dress themselves like women. And the soldiers, suddenly they are in love with one of them wearing their women clothes. This was, 37. The modernity of that scene when they all get in drag and they celebrate the arrival of these clothes. It's insane. But then when the two characters, the leading characters, end up having to run away from the prison, and they meet this lady, this woman, young woman with the mother, with the child, in this mountain lodge. The way he depicts the love affair, I think is 10 minutes of scene, the hope that he puts into this movie. Despite him being completely not cynical, but knowledgeable of what humankind can do and what is war, he still gives us a level of hope that is almost unmatched in any kind of cinema. I wish, like, a young filmmaker today from everywhere in the world could really look at this movie and understand that the vanity of the ambition of being where they believe they should be, whether it's a festival with a distributor, with a star, it's nothing compared with the sheer ambition of wanting to learn from a movie like this. So please, review again, like watch it 10 times before thinking of doing something. This is one of the great work of art ever for me. But this movie, I discovered it quite recently. I know Chabrol quite well. I think he did 70 movies, something like that. I think I saw 50. I never saw this one.
Vous avez des vers sous la peau. Des vers de toutes sortes, ma chère Betty. Des minuscules et des énormes, des remuants et des placides.
And then I said, let's watch Betty, with the wonderful late Marie Trintignant, and with Stéphane Audran, which I love. And I discovered one of the great masterpieces. This is from Simenon. It's a very cruel film, with at the center of it a very cruel character, Betty, who somehow she epitomizes selfishness and the destruction of the others for the fulfillment of their own void.
Je préfère qu'on se marie pas. Tout vaut mieux.
C'est à cause de quoi? Si tu veux bien me le dire.
C'est à cause de tout. De moi, de ma vie.
But at the same time, he makes this woman, Betty, also like an angel. And everybody is destroyed by the meeting with Betty, but at the same time, you are completely in love with Betty. And the way in which both Chabrol, Simenon, Trintignant and Audran portray this group of people and Betty, it's beautiful. This is one of the very, very beautiful movies of Claude Chabrol, a director that we should see a lot, and I miss a lot. Many times. We have Jean Dillman.
J'ai mis moins d'eau que la semaine dernière, c'est sans doute pour ça que c'est meilleur.
Despite the conformism of nowadays that hailed Jean Dillman as the greatest movie of all time, I put this movie in my top 10 of all time that I've been asked to put it for BFI. I hope that the instinct of people voting for the movie was not about a woman, directed by a woman, but the power of the cinema of Chantal Akerman, the idea of duration and the transcendence in that cinema, that I think is what makes this one of the greatest movies ever made.
Do you remember the feeling watching it for the first time?
Oh my God. I was so happy because I didn't want it to finish. I wanted it to last forever. I watched this movie for the first time at the Pesaro Film Festival. I must have been 18 when I saw it. And it's a movie that I see almost once a year. And I met Chantal Akerman in Venice. We were, me and my friend Carlo Antonelli, at the festival. We were there as spectators. I didn't have anything there. It must have been 15 years ago. And we were watching probably last Haile Gerima movie that was there. And the movie finishes, we loved it. And the light goes up and there was already nobody in the theater but me, Carlo, and this lady. And we look at her and say, I think she's Chantal Akerman. And we started to talk to her and she was wonderful. And we spent like 3 hours chatting with Chantal Akerman. So I was like...
What was it about?
We spoke about the movie we saw, we spoke about Venezia, how expensive was the Lido, and we mostly spoke about her movie, about how much we love the movies. The last movie she made about her and her mother, it's like, wow. Never believe the hype. Don't believe that Chantal Akerman should be hailed because she has made She has made movies as a woman in an industry and about women. Celebrate the fact that she sits in the throne of one of the greatest filmmakers ever, in the way in which she understood how cinema is and what the mystery of cinema is. I know this sounds a bit maybe petty to say when you talk about cinema the way we are now with these old great movies, and particularly about Chantal Akerman, but I like to think that cinema is beyond thematics. It's more about the mystery, the subversion at the center of it. Certainly she was one of the subversive, for sure.
Yeah, labels are the worst. We always talk about like gay cinema, for example, but is there something...
I think every great movie is gay. That's undoubtedly. There is not a movie that is not gay if it's great. Or at least queer, but not queer in the sense that you think of, if you think of the word queer now, that you are what, 28?
26.
26. But in the sense that is all about really like being off the center of things and actually oblique and broken.
Yeah, because the name in Italian of the book of queer was... What was it?
Oh, there are many titles. The first title when they published the movie, the book in the 80s was Diverso. Then they used a very derogative slur in the 90s and the 2000s called Checca. C'est comme dire PD.
Okay.
And then they used the title Queer.
Which is your favorite?
I like Diverso very much. But Queer is the title that Burroughs chose for it, so I defer to it.
You don't like translations?
I do. I mean, yes, like La Sirène du Mississippi by François Truffaut in Italy has a title that is completely delirious but is wonderful, which is La mia droga si chiama Julie. My drug's name is Julie. I think that was genius. It went beyond the desire of Mr. Truffaut, but I thought it was genius, right?
Yeah. So people can change the name of your movies too?
They do that all the time. I think in Japan, I Am Love was called We Make Love in Milan.
You liked it?
No, but I like the graphic, the ideogram. Very nice. I go this way. What else we have here? You put this in front of me.
Hey, Paul!
What's happening with this one?
I can tell you only a couple of things about it. I saw the movie by Mary Harron quite recently.
Okay.
I missed it when it came out, but I read the book when it came out in Italy in the 90s, like in 1990, and I wrote a script. I was obsessed with the book. So I was kind of very sad when they made the movie because I wanted to make the movie. That's why I missed it for long. Then it happened that I might do it again, but I met this great writer, which I always loved, called Scott Z. Burns, who wrote Contagion. He's a director himself. Great writer, so smart. And he's now writing it. So we'll see. We have a very large and beautiful horror movie section here. I was saying something about this today. I was saying that horror movies can be liberating, like a traumatic nightmare that you wake up from and you relieve some anxieties in yourself, not knowing how, or they can be fascistic and they can really press you under a sort of imposition of the brutality. But the horror movie that I grew up with, whether it's Carpenter, Cronenberg, Romero, Toby Hooper, they all were, again, subversive films that were breaking the mold of your unconscious and making you liberated. When the movies are sadistic or indulge into the pleasure of showing brutality for the sake of it, or even worse, when they give you the expected jolt of terror, what they call jump scare, that you as an audience become more smart than the movie itself, that is when I lost it and I'm not interested and I feel oppressed by it. But for instance, this movie, Prince du Ténèbres, the Prince of Darkness, this one, it's a real horror movie. It's like horror. It's about a group of academic scientists, physics, academic on religion. They all gather in this church in the suburbs of Los Angeles because a priest has found that in the church, underneath the church, is living the antimatter or the devil, and they want to study it, but the devil comes off his own sealed box, and the rest you have to see. It is one of the scariest movies I've seen. It has an incredible finale. In a way, the finale of this movie, with where a character can see the future, it's a lot to do with the present. Carpenter is a very, not only visionary director and one of the most profound knowledgeable filmmaker about space, ratio, relationship with ratio, and the movement inside and outside the frame. In a way, he's the great heir of the classicists. Of course, everybody knows that he was in love with the cinema of Howard Hawks, and he's always working with the geometry and the geography of Howard Hawks in his movies. Many of his movies are kind of Western. Also, this one is almost a Western, like people being assaulted by external forces and internal forces within a confined space. But certainly, Carpenter has always created cinema where the eye was always put in discussion, the eye of the beholder, of the audience. Christine is from one of the best adaptation with The Shining of a novel by Stephen King. This is a very erotic movie. The car is in love with her owner, and they make love. It's incredible. Watch it. Also, particularly this Crash, David Cronenberg. I think these directors defies the banality of nostalgia. I think the idea of this director becoming, in a way, nostalgia for the generation of the social media, where their actual practice, the way in which the movie looked, the way in which the movie played as mise-en-scène, I think is wrong. I don't think these directors belong to that canon. I think you cannot think of these movies from a nostalgic point of view, because they are very radical movies. I can see, particularly with filmmakers that operate in the genre now, that there almost is a pleasure in combining elements from these master directors. But if you do not have somehow the ontologic necessity of vision that these masters have, the way in which they see the frame, and at the same time the way they see reality and the political aspect of that, it's all become empty, and every effect will be always less than the effect that these people have been able to pull out. Crush is one of the great literary adaptations that Cronenberg did, J.G. Ballard, and The Naked Lunch is the first fiction from a Burroughs novel, The Naked Lunch. I saw this movie when it came out in Italy. It was super verboten.
You must kill her. Kill Joan Lee. It must be done soon, this week. And it must be done real tasty.
And we went to see it with my sister, and there was nobody in the theater. And it was like a very, very provocative screening. And I see this movie almost every 6 months, and I love it very much. I'm very curious to know what David thinks of Queer. Maybe he will think that it's too sentimental.
I want to talk to you. Buried, without speaking.
But I will ask him one day. You know, I asked David to play in my movie a few times. We never managed to do it, but hopefully we will do it this year. Hopefully. There is Daniel Craig in the great movie Love is the Devil, with Tilda Swinton as well.
I really can't say that I can see the pleasure in drinking beer.
This is not a really famous one, but everyone should watch it.
It's a beautiful movie about Francis Bacon and George Dyer. Very, very profound reflection on that moment and that relationship. I was once in the house of a very rich person with a very important collection of art, and there it's an incredible painting of Francis Bacon. And the owner of the house tells me that's the portrait of the lover of Bacon. And the person names the lover with another name. They didn't know the name of the lover. But I have the catalogue raisonné of Bacon at home. So I went there and I started to look, and I couldn't find it. And we know that George Dyer dies around the 70s, early 70s. So I go backward and I discovered that the painting I was watching was the portrait of Lucien Freud, which is another great, amazing artist of the 20th century. So this person had an very important painting and didn't know who was the subject in the painting. We worked a lot with some of the imagery in Bacon, and I must say that between the performance of Daniel and Drew and the dance choreography by Paul Lightfoot and Sol Leon, and the work in which my visual effect people did, I feel very good about what we got there.
That's another crazy scene.
It took 1 year for us to do that.
It's beautiful.
1 year. Thank you. What do we have here? This is one of the great movies of 2024.
My childhood, my mother. I want them back.
Of course you do.
I want them back!
Furiosa, from one of the great directors, George Miller. I love to watch George Miller. I think George Miller is amazing. One of my favorite movies is Babe Pig in the City.
No.
What, honey, what's wrong?
I think I've chopped a bit.
Amazing. What else we have? What TV shows we can look at? I never saw that though.
Oh my God, we're gonna die.
I was on the set of Queer, and one day we were coming out on the gates of Cinecittà, and I see all these people screaming, and I think, oh, you see Daniel Craig's fans. And though I approach them, and I see everybody saying, Outer Banks, Outer Banks. I said, what is Outer Banks? Then I discovered Drew is amazing, a great actor. So all my actors, Ayo Edebiri, amazing.
Hi, hello.
Hi.
I'm Sydney.
She's great in The Bear. I like The Bear. The Bear is very good. And I'm a good cook, so.
You did one TV show that I loved, We Are Who We Are.
Do we have it here? No, right?
I don't know if we have it. But I wanted to ask the link of music in this one because, I mean, I'm a big fan of Blood Orange.
Yes.
And I was like, how did he end up on this?
When we were writing the script with Francesca Manieri and Paolo Giordano, we knew that Fraser and Caitlin had to leave the military base, and we knew that Fraser was a sort of like mini, explosive, intellectual, hyper-wired young kid about the now and the past and the future. So we thought who would be kind of a hero for him in terms of the music he listened to and how he would try to persuade Caitlin to join him. And I started to think of Blood Orange because Dev Hynes' projects has always been very somehow subversive of codes, genre, the way he plays the music, the way he invites other singers to be with him. Time Will Tell, which is one of the songs that we use a lot in the movie, it's also a sort of mix of two other songs. So I thought there was a lot about the deconstruction of his own canon that could have been very interesting for Fraser to be a fan of. Fraser is a fan of many things also, like Ocean Vuong, Bertolucci. He has this big poster of Last Tango in Paris in his bedroom. And so we wrote in the script that he was making her listen to Blood Orange, that they were going to the concert, and then it was a bet. We called, and he was very open. So, okay. And he came to do the concert. The concert was a real concert. We filmed with real people coming to see the concert. It was fantastic. And then when we edited it, it's like 7 hours and something. We used a lot of existing music, a lot of John Adams, a lot of Julius Eastman. But we felt we needed a few more pieces of music that somehow were going from the beginning to the end. So I called him and I said, would you compose something for this? And he said yes. And I knew that Dev is a classical trained composer, and that Julius Eastman or John Adams were very, very much into his imagery as much as in mine. And then when we were in, what's the name of the place where we did shoot the challenges in New York, the stadium? Billie Jean, where they do the opens.
Okay.
We were preparing. I was with all the crew and stuff, and then I see these 4 people playing in one of these fields. And I look closer, and he looks closer back, and that was Dev training, and it was a coincidence.
You've done one animated movie, right?
I produced an animated movie directed by a wonderful director called Margherita Giusti. The movie was called Midseller, was in Venice in the short film competition. Now she's writing and she's going to direct her first feature film, which will be animated, which is also a French story, but I cannot say no longer. Here, Les Garçons et les Ronds. This is the last movie by Hayao Miyazaki.
Master!
And, Walt Disney is one of the greatest, if not the greatest American animator and entrepreneur, but Miyazaki stays in the same shelf with him. Every time there is a Miyazaki movie, it's an event. And this movie is as an event as everything else. Totoro is one of my favorite movies. So I like to finish with Hayao Miyazaki. For the child in you and not only.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Boonmee!